Shalom Aleichem. Welcome everybody back to the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. Welcome home to Torah, a warm welcome to Torah. I just want to stress a few things that there's a whole bunch of things that we want to accomplish here, right? Number one, to learn some Hebrew. And I'm not even saying that's the order, right? To learn Jewish principles. To become so familiar with the way, Jewish wisdom is. So hopefully we're going to learn Hebrew, we're going to learn major Jewish fundamental principles, and we're going to become more accustomed to what Judaism is all about. So I just want to stress this particular class, we're in Numbers, chapter 30, okay, is dealing with nidarim, vows and oaths. And we're going to read what we call pshat. Okay, pshat means the simple pshat, and then we're going to go deep and we're going to find out that it's counterintuitive. It's actually teaching us such profound lessons that you would never have seen in the text. In fact, you might never have thought about these ideas had it not been brought in our oral Torah. It's so fundamental and it's so important. So I just want to stress that down below in the description box, and all the people that are joining me on Skype, they all get these sheets in advance. Plus, so in the description box is a link, and you can find the Hebrew sheets. The only way you get the English sheets is if you're on my personal mailing list for this Thursday night class. So, all you guys get online, right? Not you guys, is just the Hebrew sheets. So, we're going to learn some Hebrew. So the first thing, if you notice, in chapter 30, verse 2. Oh, what did I want to mention? I didn't even mention it. That one should not walk away thinking that they have all of Judaism down, in their little pocket, right? We're scratching the surface of such deep ideas, and there's so many details. I can't even begin. I mean, there's volumes. See the volumes behind me? Nidarim, Shavuos, Nazir. So many nuances to what was said, what wasn't said, what age, are they still living in their parents' house, were they married then divorced, are they engaged but not yet fully, right, with Kedushin, we're talking about a young woman, at what age are we even talking about? So all these are details that we're not going to deal with, right? To do that you have to learn, you have to commit yourself to wanting to know what the Torah is really saying. So what we're doing is we're just scratching the surface. I also attached to the email an interesting idea, and that is the introduction on Rosh Hashanah, on the Machzor for Rosh Hashanah, the annulment of vows. I'm not going to go through it, but there is some very good commentary there that you want to go through to help understand what it is about vows. And I think that I also attached, the famous Kol Nidre. So what happens is this. The whole Jewish community, everybody comes out on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the day before Rosh Hashanah, and what do? They find Beis-Dins. In other words, in Shul, when we finish praying, everybody gathers in small groups, and they begin to nullify, to release people from vows. It's the most amazing thing. Everyone is so much love and concern for someone else and the predicament they found themselves in. Have you guys experienced this? I'm talking to you guys. You didn't go on Shul to Erev Rosh Hashanah? And you sit in front and you get your vows nullified to release yourself from these vows. And then on Kol Nidre, you've been to Shul on Kol Nidre, right? Yeah. It's like you're in heaven. That's like, I can't sing it. Remember, guys, I'm not a real good singer, but Kol Nidre V'Asorei Ushavuei. Right? And you guys have to stop me right there, right? But basically, it's everyone is singing together about the releasing of all the vows and prohibitions and oaths. It goes on in every kind of language. So I copied this for your benefit. Here's an extra copy. I don't need it. If anybody wants that didn't get, there you go. Yeah, thank you. It's about to fall. The other thing I wanted to mention before we begin, that the whole idea is so profound. What do you do when you say, I am taking upon myself not to do something, or that object is forbidden to me? It becomes so sacrosanct that you're making a Torah law. I mean, what does it mean you're not making a Torah law, because you're not allowed to add or subtract from the Torah, and yet what you say has Torah validity, meaning that you will be lashed. The person will be lashed if they violate. Are you guys listening? You'll be lashed if you violate what you just made a vow to do or not to do, which is incredible, because this is something that only God can do. What's the connection here? How can it be? In other words, if you make a vow, I vow I'm not going to have pizza, and then you eat a piece of pizza, what happens? You get lashed. It's like you're eating pork. It's 100% forbidden from the Torah. Only God has that ability, and yet, listen to this. First of all, what is speech? Speech, God breathed into man a living breath. Correct? Nishmat chai, mamish, a living soul. That what is the difference between us and the animals? We speak. We communicate on a certain level that they do not. So basically, by not, as you read, I said pshat, as you read, it says the person should not desecrate their words. Yachel devaro, lo yachel devaro. He shouldn't desecrate. We're going to see through the Yakar what this really means. And then it says, according to his word, according to the word that comes out of his mouth, he should do. That's Pashat Pshat, meaning that's the simple reading. We are going to find such depth and understanding to what actually takes place. So I just want to sum up this last point. What is it about making a vow? It gives the person the right to do something that could only be done by God, to create a new halachic status, either upon yourself or upon objects, meaning a status equivalent to that of a commandment in the Torah. This neder, as we call it, has such power, has such strength, that a person who violates his own vow can suffer a court-imposed penalty such as lashes. Okay, now if you know any Jews, any religious Jews that is, many of the words that we say through the day, even though we say, I want to, I'd like to, I really making every effort to do something, we still add these words, bli neder. Why? Why do we say, but I'm not taking an oath? Because we really mean what we say, but we don't want to get into that category of taking an oath. But we just said that this is something that's so very high and like God. Okay, with that introduction, we're going to now begin. And I hope that people took time to read. See, if you know what we're talking about now, we're going to be dealing with chapter 30, verses basically 2 almost through 17. But we're really going to deal in depth with the first few verses to become familiar with them. Put the tape on pause and become familiar with what we're about to talk about, so you know. Verse 2 says, V'yidaber Moshe el Roshei Hamatos. What is Moses doing speaking to the heads of the tribe? Usually, he's going to speak to all of Israel. But he's speaking to them. And he's telling them something, but the verse doesn't tell us what he's telling them. So look at the Yakar. Ma diber el Roshei Hamatos. What exactly is Moses saying over to the heads of the tribes? Heads of the tribes were sages. They were wise men. They were righteous people. And they're the ones that are going to say over, Livnei Israel, to the children of Israel. So God is saying, Diber el Roshei Hamatos, meaning God is saying to Moses, what I'm telling you, you must say over to them. Shiyomru eze davar livnei Israel, you must say something to them. But the verse does not explain what it is until the following few verses. V'lo peresh adayin ma yomru roshei hamatos el bnei Israel. The Torah does not explicitly say what it is that they're supposed to say to the children of Israel. Until what? Shehigid lehem parshas nadarim. Until after he already explains what it is these laws about vows are all about. So what is it that he wants the heads of the tribes to know? Shechayav rosh hamata, that the head of the tribe, lemur el hanoider, that the person who is this head of the tribe must say to the person who took the vow, what? Muterlach. Does that sound familiar? Muterlach. That's the paper I gave you on the Hetaret Nadarim, on Erev Rosh Hashanah. That's what the Beis Din says to the person. You are released. The response is you are released. And they say it 3 times. This is the statement. You don't see it here, but the Yakar is explaining, and he'll give all kinds of proof. This is exactly the message Moses is giving to the leaders, that they must go out of their way, sit down with the people, and release them from their vows. Regarding this, remember we said the words, Lo yachel devaro. The person, in verse 3, should not profane his words. He shouldn't profane his words, which means he should what? Fulfill them? No! 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 I just said that 3 times. Hu atzmo lo yochel. He himself is not allowed to profane his words. Now I'm going to change the word profane to something else. I'm going to translate it differently. Desanctify, right? We call weekdays Yom Chol, correct? Yom Chol. Is Yom Chol a profane day? No. It's profane in respect to Shabbos, correct? Okay, so lo yachel devaro, he cannot desanctify his words. We said it means he shouldn't profane his words, he shouldn't desecrate his words, but more than that, he cannot desanctify his words. Hu atzmo lo yochel, he himself is not able to do it, aval acherim, but others can machilin et devaro. They can desanctify. Because what did he do? He said, this is forbidden to me. This is like separate from me, right? Separate and kadosh are basically the same idea. Mamish separate. No, others can. He cannot. And when it says these words, kikol hayose mipiv, according to everything that comes out of his mouth. Whose mouth? We thought it's talking about the person that made the neder, the person that made the vow. But no, we already told you that, well, I don't know if I told you, but one person is equal to a Beis Din if the person is well knowledgeable about the laws of Nidarim, a very solid, learned person. It's called a mumche. And that's what these Roshei Mattos were. The heads of the tribes were well learned. Okay? So basically whatever comes out of his mouth, the head of the tribe, or the mumche, Shel Chacham Hamatilo, the sage that is releasing him from his vow, Ken Yaseh, as the verse continues, he shall do. He shall do what? Whatever comes out of that person's mouth, not your mouth. What did we think? If you make a vow, you have to do what came out of your mouth and fulfill it. No, we're going in the totally opposite direction. You can't desecrate your words, or you can't desanctify your words. You better go to these leaders and get it nullified or get it released, and whatever he says, which is likely you don't have to fulfill it, or if he concludes you do have to fulfill it, we'll see it's based on a lot of concepts, but the main concept we're going to talk about is called regret. Having regret, realizing you never should have made that vow, is going to play a big part in getting released. We're not even talking about yet the daughter who's living by the father, or the female who's married, okay? That we will talk about. And someone must ask, and I asked it myself, why is she so different? What is so unique about a female who's living by her father? She's young, or a married woman, that her husband has some kind of right with the day that he hears of her vow to nullify the vow. You have to ask that question if you read the Parsha. But we will answer it, B'ezrat Hashem. So now the next paragraph begins with verse 3. Ish ki yidor neder laHashem. It's specifically a man. When I don't mean a man as a male. I mean a man as a human being. When he makes a vow to God, so now it's also to God. So it's a human being making a vow to God. Shnei minei nedarim heim. There are actually two types of vows. Remember, this is an overall view. Obviously, there's many types of vows, but there's a particular subject where we can break it into two categories. Ki hanoider bekaso, if someone made a vow out of what? What's kas? Anger. Le'asur al atzmo eza davar, in order to forbid upon themselves something to make it forbidden for them. So that neder, that kind of vow, is not to Hashem. What are you talking about, Aaron Poston? Rabbi Poston, what are you talking about? I made a neder to God. No, you made it to yourself. If you did it out of anger, you did it to yourself. I'm sorry, one second. The one who makes a neder out of anger, that's to himself, for it's not to Hashem. And also the verse says in Ish, and Ish means a person. So that is specifically a person, ki yidor. When he is an Ish, when he's a person, miyushav dasa. What is it about human beings, hopefully? That they have their sound mind and body. It means, yishuv das means that they are sane and it's well thought out. That's going to be a problem. Now we would have thought the other way around. Anger's a problem, and it's well thought out. That's a good thing. I want you to know, so many things in Judaism is counterintuitive. It takes breaking your head over to really delve deep into it. So we have a verse in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 4. By the way, it's on page 1 on the number 4 on the 4 source sheet, where it specifically talks about a human being, a man who makes an oath. And that is talking about it making an oath to God, meaning that's when it's an oath to God, when a human being, when a person who's yishuv das, when a person has his mind and he's sane. Hu neder l'Hashem. Ava hanoder bekaso, but the person that makes the vow out of anger? No, look at what it says in Koheles. You'll find that on page 2 in the English sheet. Be not hasty with your spirit to become wroth, for wrath lies in the bosom of fools. Now, what he's going to tell you is you're not a human being. You're not an ish. You're not a sane human being, but you're more like an animal. Look at the Hebrew words, right? The verse says, "Kas b'chek ksilim yinuach, im kain eno ish." You're a fool. You're not a man. The nimshok kebehema. Actually, you're closer to an animal. Okay, so basically, when you're angry, you're not sane, and therefore you're not really held in such accountability either. Let's go on, because what we're going to see is that the next paragraph describes how the rabbis look down, degrading, disparaging, negatively to someone who makes a vow. But wait, not only if they make a vow, but if they make a vow and they fulfill it. This is really troubling. Aren't you troubled? All our lives, we're taught if you say something, you have to make your word mean something. It's valuable. You must fulfill it. Now we're talking about a vow here. It's a unique idea. So in the Gemara Nedarim on Kaf Bet 22a, the Gemara basically talks about this idea that the rabbis speak disparagingly about someone who makes the neder. Sipru b'genut hanoder v'amru. You know what they say? The one who takes the vow, shahanoder ki'ilu bona bama. It's as if he built an Obama. He built what's Obama? An altar. An altar, well, what's wrong with an altar? I want to tell you something. A Jew has an obligation to bring korbanos only to Jerusalem, only to this chosen place that God chose, whether it was wherever it was, but they can't just build their own altar. And then it says, so that's already a problem. In other words, if you build your own altar outside of the temple area, that's a problem. And then one who's mekaimo, one who fulfills, who actually fulfills that which he made the oath, kilu hikri v'leh. Whoa, my heart is palpitating. What are you talking about? Are you saying that if I make a vow, that's already one problem? And then if I actually fulfill my vow, I'm exasperating? It's such a much bigger problem. It's crazy. But that's what Chazal tell us. So what does it mean? Well, guess what? He brings proof. Ukedemus raya l'divreihem. He's going to bring us similar ideas. As Rashi explains, now it says over here, if you look at the verse, right, we're going back to source number 2 over here. It says, this is the thing. In Hebrew, zeh hadavar. What does it mean, this is the thing? This is the thing the Lord commanded. Very nice. Well, guess what? Go to Vayikra chapter 17, verse 2. Right? You can find that on number 7 in the English sheets. Right? Speak to Aaron, to his sons. If you're looking in an art scroll Chumash, it'll tell you this is dealing with sacrifices outside the temple. You just have to read the paragraph and you'll see it. And over there, it tells you the severity of doing such a thing. This is the thing. The same words appear. Now, there is the 13 hermeneutical principles. I like the word exegesis. I just love that word, exegesis. Right. Anyway, so basically, we're talking about a gezerah shava, one of the 13 hermeneutical principles, where what? 2 words appear in 2 different places. The same word appears in 2 different places that do not seem to have any connection whatsoever. Yet, on a spiritual level, we're talking about a connection of halacha. Now, these ideas can only be brought from a person who heard it from his rabbi, all the way back to Moshe. In other words, it's not something someone wakes up one morning and says, oh, I see this word in Deuteronomy, and I see the same word in Numbers, and I'm going to make my own connection. You could do all you want. It's very nice. But it will not have any real depth in terms of halacha or in terms of a real limud. You're just connecting dots, and there's nothing wrong with making attempts to connect dots. But it's not going to have any validity in reality. But that's fine. So we're talking about zeh davar appears by the slaughtering out of an animal outside of the Temple Mount, or outside of where God chooses. And you have those words over here by nidarim. So this is where the clear car says, v'omer ani, dun mina. We're going to learn one from the other. Ma lahal and bama. Just think about it. Over there, it talks about a bama, an altar, afkan bama. So too, when it says over here, zadavar, by the neder, you're also having this altar, a high place. What's an altar? A high place. Ki shchutei chutz, what is it about shchutei chutz? Is a makri babama. When you slaughter an animal, remember, you're allowed to slaughter animals outside the Temple Mount for consumption. It's not kadosh, it's chol. The whole Masechet Chulin deals with slaughtering animals, not for sacrifices, right? That's one of the main concepts. Okay, so it's no problem, but when you slaughter it and then you offer it as an offering, that's where you begin to have problems, right? So it's not just the slaughtering, it's the following through. And where does it follow through? With a bama, with an altar. So too, in our parsha, we're dealing with vows, it also says zeh davar. So hanemar kan benoider medaber makri babama. That's how we made the connection. That when it's speaking over here about the one making the vow, it's speaking as if he is making an offering on the altar. Ki hanoider doime kilu banabama. And then we're going to discuss those words, that the one making the vow, it's as if he's building an altar. Here we go. Now the first line, the last paragraph, the first line of that paragraph is the last line on our page. He says, Tama shel davar. Everything we just laid groundwork for, and we're not even finished. We're going to still be laying more groundwork. The reason for the matter is as follows. Ready for this? Shiyarda haTorah lesof das hanoider. I'll translate it literally, and I'm going to translate it poetically the way I like to. That the Torah brings down at the end the opinion, what was on the mind of the one making the oath. That's literally what it says. I'm going to say Shiyarda Torah means the Torah downloads. You like that word? Downloads. The Torah is actually downloading, and I'm going to also translate Torah's reality. Reality becomes downloaded by looking at what happens at the end. It's a revelation of what the opinion was at the beginning. That's a very heavy statement I just said. The Torah is downloaded. The reality becomes downloaded to what at the end, you'll see what happens at the end of what was really the intent at the very beginning. And that's what is happening here. Because if the person wanted to, if the person made the neder out of anger, he will or she will have regret. She or he will then go to the Beis Din and get it released. But if they did it with Shiva Das, with a sound mind and sanity, they're not going to have any regret, and they're going to fulfill it. And that's where all the problems begin. Now, another concept is kihu oiser al atzma, right? The last few words on page 1. He's actually making something forbidden on themselves. Ma shekol ha'olam nohagim bo heter. I mean, this is an unbelievable statement. Every Jew can eat pizza, right? Kosher pizza. I mean, if you have health issues, I get it. But if someone says, I am making a vow, I'm not going to eat something that's permissible to everybody, what am I doing? I'm separating myself from the klal. I'm saying that I am higher and holier and mightier and separate. The main point here is separate, but we're going to talk about holier as well. So first thing he does, or she does, is she's separating herself. Everybody who's doing something, but I am not. And that's wrong. The next thing is Mistama Rum Levavo Hisiu Mikola Eda Yibadeo. This is the next tragedy the person falls into. That it's a raising of your heart. I'm just going to translate as haughtiness. It's the haughtiness of the heart that brings him way up above the entire congregation and separates them from everyone else. Do you understand? This is anti-Judaism, right? We're all in this together. We're actually one big family. And wait till you see on the second line down, the first 5 words, V'hoitzi es atzmo min haklal. They have removed themselves from the klal, from the Jewish people, from the nation, from the general populace. I'm going to talk about Klal Yisrael in another way, and I want to go into this because it's a whole other shir. I read a beautiful idea of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Why do we say Shema Yisrael before we say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? Shouldn't the mitzvah of unifying God and stating that God is one enough? Why do I have to say Shema Yisrael? Because we need everybody else. It's a national thing. You don't have a king without a people. That we want to take it upon ourselves to crown Hashem king. We need Klal Yisrael. Do not separate yourself from the Klal. Do not separate yourself from Am Yisrael. And if you're not Jewish, graft yourself, cling to them, support them, do whatever it is to join up as much as you possibly can with Am Yisrael. Okay, now, in this way, everything we just spoke about, the rabbis speak about in Gemara Chagiga, page 22a. It says, Shalo yehe kol echad holek uboina bama la'atzmo. Now, I focus on the word la'atzmo because what he's saying is, the Gemara is saying is, a person should not, each and every person should not go and build their own altar li'atzmo. Now, you can translate as for themselves or to themselves. And I don't know if there's a great difference, but if I say you're actually building it to yourself. You're making yourself like a god. You're making yourself holier than everyone else. Right? And so therefore, the la'atzmo is a very interesting word. It's for yourself, but really to yourself. Ki al zederek ge'a v'gaon. What's the word gay mean in Hebrew? The word gay, gimel aleph hey. Gay means pride, but not in the positive sense. Not in the positive sense. Pride as in haughtiness. Pride as in a very negative trait. That's the Hebrew. The word is gimel aleph hey, gay. Okay, so we're going to, and when we come across that word, we'll just translate as gay pride. Okay? Okay, so all this is derech, kol ze derech geya v'gaon, as gay pride. Kamosh Amru Chazal, the rabbis say in Gemara Sota 4b, kol mi sheyesh bo gasas ruach, anybody that has this horrible trait of gasas ruach is what? Is thickness or coarseness of spirit, which means haughtiness. It's ki'ilu bana bana. It's as if he built an altar. As it says in Isaiah chapter 3, verse 22. Now we're going to use this verse later, so remember it. It said, Chidu lechem min ha'adam, withdraw, refrain from the person, asher neshama be'apo, whose neshama, his soul, is in his nose. When we talk about a soul being in your nose, it's a code word for anger, right? Like a dragon. They have dragons in Sweden? I don't know. We can't find any here. But anyway, asher neshama bi'apo. Stay away from a man. A person should refrain. Anger is not a good thing. Ki bama nikshavhu. Bameh. It says bameh. Bet mem hey, but with the vowelization. Because what is he worth? If he's an angry person, he's not even a human, he's like an animal. But wait, because it says bameh. What does bameh sound like? Bama. And that's what he's going to say. The Gemara says this. Tikrei bameh. Don't read the word as in what? Bameh. But ela bama. He considered the person who withdraws from anger. In other words, the person who actually is not angry, he's building the bama. The guy who was angry made the vow. He made a mistake and he has regret. And he's not going to build the altar, and if he did, he's not going to sacrifice. He's going to get released from his vows. But the one who refrained from anger, who's sane and settled, he is considered bama nikshavu. So, ma inyan hagasa ruach el boine bama. How are we relating this idea of someone who's haughty to building a bama? So understand the language. 1 second. Elavadai shemitzad gasas ruchu boine bama li'atzmo. Again, la'atzmo. With absolute certainty, from the aspect of his haughtiness. Because the person is so haughty, he's building an altar to himself, to themselves, as we said. Not only that, what did we say the word bama means? It means an altar, but it really means a high place. It means a high place. And therefore, gavoa is what it means. It means a high place. It's a language of gavoa. V'oto derek geya v'gaon, and that is the way of those who are gay pride, right? Geya v'gaon. Hamatzoi bebona bama. They are the ones who build for themselves this high place, this arrogance. Matzoi gam benoda, but guess what? This is also found in the one who makes a vow. That's why there's a connection. Kimastama kivanato kedei sheyeh mukzach b'chasid ufarush. Now this may sound very parv, but it has two connotations to it. Most likely the person's intent is to strengthen themselves and to become pious, but the end result is to be separate. And that could be a problem. Or we're saying that it's okay, but just don't take it to an extreme. Not sure, but we're going to get clarity as we read on. However, yesh makom lomar, there is place to say, noider bekaso yokiach, the person who makes the vow out of anger will prove to us everything we're saying up until this point. Ki mistame bekaso lo niskavin l'shem yuhura. Yuhura means haughtiness. So most likely, the person who vowed out of anger, he was not intending to be haughty. No. What we're going to do now, you're required to separate, to find a distinction, difference between one who makes a vow out of saneness, sanity and a settled mind, and between one who makes a vow out of anger. How are we ever to know if the person originally made the vow out of anger or not? You know what? If the person originally made the vow out of anger, he's not going to be compared to building the altar. And that's why, because it says, Hamakaimo, remember the rabbi said if the guy actually fulfills it, it's as if he offered on it. Well, guess what? This is proof. This is the clear proof we need. Everybody should be able to relate to this. Anything that a person does out of anger, that what happens is that when the anger abates, when the anger cools down, and you know what happens? He enters a psychological state of regret. I'm going to add the word even shame. It could be even shame. But certainly regret, he will not fulfill his vow. And what is he going to do? He's going to go to a chacham. He will go to the sage. He will go to the rabbi. He will go seek advice and get released because of the regret, because of the shame. That's why it says, remember it said if he made the oath, but then he doesn't fulfill it. What does he do? He goes and seeks advice. He goes and asks. It's telling us retroactively, we know. Remember I spoke about this idea that the Torah downloads the end based on what was really in the beginning, meaning reality. You can see reality. You can read people. And this is the job of the rabbi, to be able to understand, should I let him off the hook? Does she have enough regret? Does she fully understand the consequences of taking this oath? So once they go and asked, Vadai bekaso neder, then certainly it was because of anger, umitcharet, because they obviously had regret. And therefore it's not at all like they built an altar. And when Chazal tells us in Gemara Chagiga, there's an interesting verse. We sing it Friday nights. It's amazing if we only knew what we were singing. In Psalms 95:11. It's on the last page, number 10. So the verse says, for which reason I swore in my wrath. This is God speaking. Obviously it's King David, but through Ruach HaKodesh, he's understanding what God is thinking and feeling. For which reason I swore in my wrath, right? Asher nishbati bi'api im yevu'un el menuchasi, that they would not enter my resting place. We're talking about God swearing that I'm not bringing the Jewish people into Israel. I'm so angry with them. Well, guess what? When you're angry, you can regret and nullify, right? Release what you originally vowed. For sure, that's what we're praying. That Hashem was sincere in his regret. That Hashem was sincere in his charata, and therefore will bring us in, and has since brought us in many times over. Okay, anyway, we're back in that verse. So the Kli Yakar says, Bi'api nishpati, in my anger I swore. That's what God was saying. V'chazarti chashoch ha'af v'chahema, meaning I retracted. I changed my mind, so to speak. Remember, there is no emotion by God. He doesn't one day feel happy and one, right? These are just languages that we can understand in order to learn about us. This is a thing, a concept that we can learn about us, that when we have regret, then it shows that it was out of anger and we can be released from our vow. Aval hamakaimo, but if one actually fulfills their vow, they're not coming to the state of regret. They know nisha olav, and the person is not going to ask any advice. So sofal mekiach, the end proves shemitok yishuv adas neder, that it was with a sane mind and a settled mind the person made that vow. And the Torah goes out of its way to be concerned for such things. V'choshta oto Torah, sharum levavo. God forbid people should become so arrogant. Havilu de midazu, in order to come to this horrible trait of a character trait, shalachach et atzmo letzad acher, that they should take themselves away from the klal, that they should separate themselves from the Jewish people, from the nation of Israel. People work so hard to be part of Am Yisrael. Right? We know so many converts that why would someone try to work, give up, sacrifice, learn years perhaps, and then, we should all learn from converts, right? They sacrifice so much, you don't want to give it up for anything, okay? So here, it's a very important lesson. Do not separate yourself from the klal. So if the person does separate themselves, it's as if they actually offered an animal on the altar. Once they make that offering, meaning once they fulfill their vow, it shows you that they had sanity. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they have no regret. And that's a problem. That's a problem. God doesn't want that. Why do Jews everything? Bli nader, bli nader, bli. How often do you hear that? How many times a day? 100 times a day minimum, right? And if you're not hearing it, you're hanging around with the wrong people. You got to say it yourself, right? Okay. By fulfilling it, you show what you really had in mind in the very beginning. He shows by offering the animal on the altar, meaning fulfilling the, right? This is the reason you built the altar. So too, when you fulfill your vow, you made that vow with full cognizant sanity and everything. And that is a problem. Don't make the vow. As we are now going to see that someone who makes a vow is called evil. Oh my gosh. Now this goes against everything that we were brought up with. Zehu shamasik shambigam. The Gemara itself says it. The same Gemara. Shmuel says, Amar Shmuel, Kol hanoider, anybody that makes a vow, nikra rasha, is called evil. Well, we're not just making this up. There's a pasuk, there's a proof, there's a verse. Mikra, look in Deuteronomy 23:23. Now, if you don't believe me, look it up yourself. The second verse, here I have 22 and 20 through 24. It says, but if you shall refrain from making vows, you will have no sin. Sin is like a code word for evil. You agree? Yes. Nobody's disagreeing. So if you refrain from sin, you will not have, if you refrain from making vows, you will have no sin. Ki techdal lindor lo yebecha chet. Clear as mud so far? You can't make this stuff up, This is the holy word. So here we have the alfin in chadla chadla. There's another, it's like, he doesn't say it's a gzer shava, but basically it's the same concept. You have two words that are in both of these verses. We had the first one we saw in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 22. And we have over here, actually, he's going to bring another verse as well. In Job, chapter 3, verse 16. There the wicked ceased from anger, they were weary rest. Now this we have to work out. Sham Rishayim Chadlu Rogez. Who is really evil? The one who are not angry. There the wicked cease from anger. The wicked ones are not the angry ones. Remember, we said the ones who made the vow out of anger, so they're going to be humble, they're not going to be haughty, and they're going to go and ask to be released. But it's the wicked, the one who is stubborn, the one who made a sure thing out of it from the very beginning, and he's going to fulfill it. This is, I'm telling you, it's counterintuitive. It goes against everything, right? Here we go. So we just saw Job 3:16. Nira Nomar seems du mina mina. We can learn one from the other. Just like over there, there's a chadalat harogez mishtaoi. Over there, just like there's a cessation of anger, it's not angry. Afkan, so too, we also have someone who's making the vow, who's not angry. Ki eno nikra rasha ki im ba'ofen zeh. The only way you're going to be called evil is if you do it like this, without anger. Shekavar chada rogez. He's already ceased from his anger. Afal pikein hu oime benidro. Nevertheless, he stands by his vow. The eno nisholav. He doesn't seek any advice or way out. And this is igolai mil sulamafreya. This is a revelation of the matter retroactively. We can see exactly what was on his mind when he originally made that vow. Shalom mitokas nadar. It was not within anger that they made the vow. Ki kavar nishtaheh kishir zman, because there was already a lot of time that passed where the anger would have ceased. And that's Sham Rishoyim. That's the verse, again, in Job 3:16. That's where the person is called a rasha, evil, when the anger is no longer there, if whatever was there to begin with. Meaning to say, hu nikra rasha k'shechado roigez, that he's still called evil when there is no anger. Oh, eneno legamre, where there's no anger at all. Meaning the first, he might have been angry a little bit, and now it's gone, and he's still holding to himself, or there was never anger at all. It's certainly within a settlement of mind, a sane mind. He made the neder k'dei livnos bama liatzmo. He did it to make an altar to himself. Do you understand? This is arrogance. Al kain hamekaymo nikra rasha. Therefore, the person who fulfills their vow is actually evil. Ki dera geya v'gaon lo, because that's called gay pride. Ani moisef od gezer shava, and he, the Yakar, wants to make a conceptual gezer shava. Once you already have one, it's in the same verses, because chidlu appears in both verses as bama. Look again in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 22. That's on note 9, which we saw, I think. Withdraw yourselves from a man whose breath is in a nostril. For in what? So you have, even though we have the word bama, and we read it as, bameh, and read it as bama, the same word, the same verse starts off with chidlu, the same idea of ceasing from anger. Okay, the last paragraph on this page, and we're almost at the end, okay, goes like this. This is what it means. When it says, Ish ki yidur neder l'Hashem, when the person makes the vow to God, Kishu ish benidro v'shifoy bedaso, that's when he is a man in his vow and his sanity, meaning he's sane, he has a sound mind, mitoch yishuv edas, within this stability of mind, he made his vow. Allah derech hodah, this is what the Torah is telling you. Kekol hayotzu mipiv yaseh, according to everything that comes out of his mouth, he should do. Ki ein sofo lavo lidei charata. That person, his end, he will not come to any regret. But what about the one that was noider mitokas, the person who made the vow within anger, who amar lo yaseh? Fine, you know what, he said it, but he won't do it. He won't fulfill it. Kisofo liyot nisha alav, because he's the kind of guy that will go out of his way to speak to the rabbi, to find out, to get a release, kishchok hamato, once his anger is abated and dies down. And then it says, Neder Hashem, he's giving a vow to God, he's making a vow to God to exclude what? Shelo yidur l'shum yora. If you make a vow to yourself for the sake of being holier than thou, that's not to God, that's to arrogance. And that is to build a bama to yourself. And the whole idea of building a bama means you're offering not to God. You can only offer to God in the temple. And I just want to, before I leave this last paragraph, I have a very good friend, Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer. I'm sure you've all heard of him. And so we were at his table. I was zochet to be at his table one, I think it was a Shabbos. And he said to the table, what if you found out today that you weren't Jewish? What would you do? So, somebody says, I'll go out and buy a cheeseburger. I don't know, I'll go out and eat lobster. I'll eat a not kosher steak. I don't know. He says, you know what I would do? I would go out and build myself a bama and sacrifice on it. Because non-Jews are allowed, meaning it's not forbidden, to build your own altar and sacrifice on it. Only the Jews, as a klal, we have one place that God chose, and that's it. We don't have this opportunity. So he said, that's what I would do, and then I'd go and convert. Because that, as a non-Jew, I could do. I would love to do it. Anyway, that was a plug for Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer. The last two paragraphs on the last page. Lo yachel divaro. We said these words mean he should not desecrate his own words. But aval acherim machilin divaro. But others may, and I'm going to use, instead of desecrate, I'm going to use the word desanctify. They can take it down a notch. Tamo leheter nedarim biyachid mumcha. There's a reason that a single male, a single judge, single man, if he's knowledgeable enough, he could release the person, or shlosha hediot, or three normal, somewhat knowledgeable, but not extremely knowledgeable people can act as judges, and they're called a beis din. So you want to go, and you get your vow released. Now, we did learn there's a difference in language between what the father and the husband, it's called hafara. Hafari means annul. Annul means as if it never happened. For an example, if a woman marries and then they get divorced, she would not be allowed to marry a Kohen. But if the marriage was annulled, she could marry a Kohen because it's as if the marriage never took place. She's not a divorcee if they got divorced. It's really an annulment, it's not a divorce. So which is stronger, a release or an annulment? The annulment is much stronger, has a major effect. In fact, all of the, I'll call crimes that were involved until it was released, if it was annulled, it's as if those crimes never existed. If they're saying we're releasing you, we're acknowledging that it exists, and all the crimes, the violations of the vow, you still have to pay for, so to speak. And now you're released from here on in, right? You see, to annul something has much more power, right? So we learn this concept of annulment from the father and the husband. Now I want to just preface this. We're going to learn, I know this may feel uncomfortable for many of the women. What is going on here? What kind of power does the husband have over the wife? It's a really strange thing, right? I'm going to try my best to explain the way the clear. I think it's beautiful. And it should resonate, if you're being honest with yourself, for every human being who's listening to this. Just as the father and the husband, they do have this power to annul. There's a strength in this relationship. Now don't kill the messenger, because every woman is under the authority of her husband. What does that mean? I just want to explain. When a woman gets married with free will, she can't be forced into a marriage. The husband is the one who signs the ketubah, that he's taking all the responsibility. Housing, right? Shelter, food, clothing. There's many other obligations I don't want to discuss right now. Too long to talk about it. But he's the one who's going to take care of her. She has really no obligation except to be taken care of. So think about it like this. Because she's under, and maybe we'll translate reshus as under his grace, meaning under his power and authority, but not in the negative sense, but under his grace. O bereshut aviha, same thing with the father. Ein koach biyado la'asot gedolo ketana bilti haskamatam. She cannot just do whatever she wants without his permission, i.e., when he's clothing her, and she says, I'm only going to wear, name a shoe, Pravda shoes, whatever it is, Prada shoes, some kind of very expensive. Why? She can do that. She said, I'm only wearing $1,000 shoes from now on. Well, that's her husband, that's her father. That's her husband is going to go out and work triple time now to pay for her shoes. He's to go out of his way now to go shopping, right? Go to get a flight to France to pick up these shoes. What if she says, I'm not going to eat gluten anymore? I mean, that's like gluten-free is like twice the price. And he has to go 3 blocks every day out of his way to get her the bread or whatever it is that she wants. Don't you think she should have discussed it with him first? Had his agreement? Am I getting any nods? Okay. So here we go. Listen to this idea. Doesn't matter what she makes the vow, whether it's big or small, most likely she should have looked for his agreement. She doesn't have the power to do this vow without his agreement. So she can't really make the vow without his agreement. As the mafreya bitel neder mikaro. That's why he has the power. The father or the husband has the power to annul. Remember, annul has a lot of power. Annul retroactively. Ki mistama al datam nadara o ki'ilu nadara al datam. Which means that it must be a fact that either she thought he would be in full agreement, he was in full agreement, or she thought he would be in agreement. In other words, in her mind, I mean, he's paying for the shoes. He's paying for the gluten-free. So she must have thought that either he is in agreement or he would certainly agree. But it must be that the agreement is part and parcel of what she's asking. So, kach kol ish. Now, that's true by women. What about us, men? We go to the Beis Din, and they have the right or authority to release us. Because everything that we do is ultimately in haskama with the agreement of the Beis Din. Right? Ultimately. So we're all under the same, and I'm only talking about specific, the women who's married, and her husband hears about it, or doesn't hear about it, or a young girl, which is, we're talking about a very small window of time. Could be only 6 months after puberty, it could be for a year. Anyway, it's a very small period of time that we're talking about anyway. So what about the rest of mankind? Anybody, man, woman, and child, can always go to the Beis Din and get released. But it's not, in other words, the husband or the father has a stronger, even though it's only the time he hears it and he can do it, but all Jews have an obligation to follow the court, right? It says in the Torah, whatever they say you have to do, right? So you in your mind know, I have the Torah, great, but I also have a Sanhedrin, or I have a Beis Din, I have an authority. I have a higher authority I have to listen to. And so if they would tell the Jewish people, no, that's not right, this is what you have to do. I, as a Jew, would say, of course, I have to follow the Beis Din. So I'm automatically under the authority of the Beis Din. So no matter what I vow, I have in mind that they should ultimately agree. Same to like the girl, the young girl, or the wife should say, I mean, if my husband's going to have to pay for it, he obviously has to agree. So too, the Beis Din is the ultimate authority of Jewish law. So if it goes against, or it's somehow under the category of their authority, I too, as a Jew, am under their authority. I know I'm under their authority. I'm not a rebel. Right? I'm under their authority. So here it goes like this. Kach kol ish miYisrael. So every Jew, Bershus Beis Din, is under the authority of the court. Mechoyev lasos kekol asher yoro lo haBeis Din. We are obligated to do whatever they say. Therefore, every human being, every Jew, when they make a vow, they know in their head conditionally it's based on the agreement of the Beis Din with him, and when they don't agree, they can uproot the neder. Okay, kol yachid mumcha nikra Beis Din. I was speaking to someone today, they told me Rav Moshe Feinstein, one of the greatest of the last generation, when he discussed with people, and he said, I am a Beis Din. And that's true because a mumcha, an individual on his level, has the authority of a beis din. You don't need 3. His word was enough. Kol shlosha hediot. So too, if you had 3, al kein biyodam lahatir nidro limano minachet. They want to prevent. That's what the whole oral Torah, I have to say. So much of the laws that we have is to guard us from sin. And they are there to prevent us from sinning, thereby releasing us from our vows. Because once we have a vow, what's the likelihood of us not fulfilling it? I don't know. Could be 50-50. Could be 5% out of 95%. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Their role, their job, they love us. They're acting like God, right? They're there to protect us. And in their service, they're there to release us from the vows. Isn't that amazing? That's what they do. Because anybody that makes a vow is already called a sinner, and they're there to release us from our sin. As we saw in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 23. Anyone who refrains from making vows will not sin. That's what it says. You can't mess with the text. Now, the last few lines. Why is it the actual language of annulling is by the father and the father and the husband, whereas by the beis din, by the chacham, it's a release. Since the woman is more underneath the authority of her husband and her father than all the rest of the Jews who are just under beis din, that's why they, the husband and the father, the language that's going to be used is a retroactive. It's a total release from the very beginning. But whereas, ki'ilu lo sham neder klal, as if the vow never even took place. But the language of hatara, a release, teaches something that actually was forbidden on somebody from the very beginning, at least for a period of time, and then it was released. He was released from this forbidden nature, whether it was him or the object. Ki eno mufor mikol v'kol. There's no retroactive annullification at all. Shrei hadavar taloi b'charata, because ultimately it comes down to what we call regret. So the release has to have some kind of regret. And that's what we discussed the whole night. Just keep in mind, if you understand this principle we talked about, that's your opening right there. Wow, I didn't realize how evil I would be just by mentioning and saying these words. I want to get out of it. Yes, I'd like to fulfill. So say it next time. This is what I'd like to accomplish. This is my goal. This is my, matara. I will do everything I can, but I'll say bli neder. Say bli neder. Okay? So know your value. You have a goal. Go for it. Shoot for the stars. But don't lock yourself in to a neder, because it's not a positive thing. Okay? Even in Nazir, if somebody feels they're like an alcoholic, right? They feel such a weakness in a certain area of their life, and in order to stay alive, right, then this is okay. I'm only going to stay alive if I mamish make a vow. But also you can condition it, right? This is how I feel right now. This is how I feel right now. This is what I need right now in my life, to stay away from this poison, right? But it's not going to be forever. I don't know when I'm going to give it up, so say bli neder. Make sure it's without a nedar. It's okay? So hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, we've all learned something tonight. We learned a little Hebrew. We learned quite a lot of Judaism and principles. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week. Let me just think. Yep, we'll see you next week, B'ezrat Hashem. So I always wish people a great life, a great Shabbos. Enjoy yourself.
Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Hamikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion.